In 1940, a woman walked across a sun-drenched Sicilian piazza. She said almost nothing. She did nothing wrong. And over the next 4 years, her own town destroyed her for it. 60 years later, a director named Giuseppe Tornatore made a film about what happened to her. A film that Harvey Weinstein cut by 16 minutes before American audiences were allowed to see it. A film that earned 2 Oscar nominations, divided critics down the middle, and produced one of the most quietly devastating performances in the history of Italian cinema. Most people have seen the short version. Today, you are going to hear about the one that was taken away. The year 2000. Giuseppe Tornatore, the Sicilian director who had already won an Academy Award for Cinema Paradiso, returns to the landscape of his childhood with a new story. A co-production between Italy's Medusa Film and Miramax. A $10 million period drama set against the backdrop of World War II, starring a model-turned-actress named Monica Bellucci, who was about to become one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. The film was called Malena. What happened to it, and what happened behind the camera to bring it to life, is a story about beauty, obsession, censorship, and what a film loses when someone else decides it is too honest. This is the making of Malena. And we are starting where Tornatore did, with a story that spent 20 years waiting to be told. The original idea for Malena did not belong to Tornatore. It came from Luciano Vincenzoni, the veteran Italian screenwriter who had helped Sergio Leone craft the dialogue for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and Once Upon a Time in the West. In the 1970s, Vincenzoni wrote a short story he titled Ma l'amore no. It was set in wartime Sicily. It followed a beautiful woman who becomes the target of an entire community's desires and resentments. He intended it for Pietro Germi, the master of Italian social comedy. Germi died before it could be made. The project stalled, then it disappeared. For over 20 years, nothing happened. Then Tornatore read it. He had grown up in Bagheria, a small town near Palermo. He had spent his childhood watching exactly the kind of community Vincenzoni described. The gossip networks, the silent cruelties, the way provincial life could consume a person without ever raising its voice. Cinema Paradiso had been his love letter to that world. But Malena was something harder, something that had stayed with him long after the warmth faded. But Tornatore needed one more thing before the film could exist. He needed to find her. In 1995, Tornatore directed a television commercial for Dolce & Gabbana. The setting was rural Sicily, sun-bleached stone, narrow streets, the smell of the Mediterranean. The actress in it was Monica Bellucci. Something about that combination, her presence against that specific landscape, never left him. By the time Tornatore sat down to write Malena, the decision was already made. When I wrote the film, he said, I wrote it for her. I knew that Monica Bellucci would be Malena, not as a possibility, as a certainty. At that point, Bellucci was known in Europe primarily as a model who had moved into acting. She had not yet appeared in the Matrix sequels. She had not yet built the global career that would define the decade ahead. What she had was something Tornatore recognized and could not name, a quality of being looked at that carried its own kind of authority, a dignity that survived the gaze. That quality was going to be essential, because Malena, as a character, speaks almost no dialogue in the entire film. She had to communicate everything, pride, grief, fear, endurance, through posture and expression and the way she moved through a space. Bellucci also had to learn Sicilian, a dialect substantially different from her native Italian. Finding the young male lead was an entirely different challenge. Tornatore screened 3,000 boys across Sicily. He narrowed them down through rounds of increasingly rigorous auditions. The final 9 each shot an actual scene with full costumes and a complete crew. From that group, a 15-year-old from Messina named Giuseppe Sulfaro emerged. He was 3 years older than his on-screen character. He had never acted professionally. He had exactly what the role required. Production shot primarily in Sicily, with the long harbor sequences reconstructed in Morocco. Cinematographer Lajos Koltai, who would later be Oscar-nominated for Miramax's own The Pianist, bathed the film in the particular golden light of memory. Warm, slightly unreal. The kind of light that already feels like the past while you are still inside it. Before we go further, if you ever saw Malena, I want you to think about the version you watched. Was it on VHS, a DVD from the early 2000s, something you caught late at night on cable? Because the version most people in the English-speaking world have seen is not the film Tornatore made, and the reason why is the most important part of this story. Here is the fact that most discussions of Malena quietly set aside. There are two versions of this film. The original Italian cut runs 108 minutes and was rated T in Italy, suitable for all audiences. The version released in the United States and United Kingdom, distributed by Miramax, runs 92 minutes, 16 minutes shorter. Rated R, and Tornatore reportedly had to submit it 3 separate times before the American Ratings Board accepted it. Harvey Weinstein, who had built Miramax into one of the most powerful distribution houses in the world and had already become notorious among foreign filmmakers for cutting their work, removed sequences that were central to the film's argument. What was taken out were primarily the extended fantasy sequences in which Renato, the 13-year-old narrator, imagines his relationship with Malena. In the Italian version, these sequences are extended, detailed, and psychologically essential. They are not gratuitous. They are the mechanism through which the film explains how a community's collective obsession with a woman's body gets reproduced in the mind of even its most sympathetic observer. Remove them, and the film still functions as a period drama, a beautiful one. But it no longer asks the uncomfortable question it was designed to ask. Tornatore has spoken about Malena as an allegory for Italy itself, that everything the town does to this woman mirrors what happened to Italy during and after the war. Desired, exploited, publicly humiliated, and ultimately still standing. That reading requires the full film to work. The American version preserves the surface. It removes the argument. But here is the part of this story that most people never get to. While Harvey Weinstein was shortening the film, one of the most legendary composers in cinema history almost didn't score it at all. When Tornatore first approached Ennio Morricone about composing the score for Malena, Morricone said no. He was already committed to a Hollywood production. His schedule was full. The answer was no. Then Tornatore gave him the script. Morricone read it. And somewhere in the final pages, in the closing scene that brings the film to its quiet, devastating conclusion, he changed his mind. He set aside the other commitment. He said yes. The score Morricone produced was nominated for both an Academy Award and a Golden Globe for Best Original Score. It was his 13th collaboration with Tornatore since Cinema Paradiso in 1988. The Malena main theme became one of the most immediately recognizable pieces of music from his later career, built on the specific quality of things remembered rather than lived. Melancholic without being sentimental, nostalgic without being soft. Alongside Lajos Koltai's cinematography, that score was what carried Malena into the ceremony at the 73rd Academy Awards in 2001. It did not win. But the nominations confirmed something the critics had not settled. This was not a minor film. 25 years after its release, Malena occupies a specific and enduring place in the history of Italian cinema. It did not eclipse Cinema Paradiso. Nothing Tornatore made has, but it developed the kind of sustained second life that films with genuine substance tend to earn over time. The main theme still circulates, in covers, in samples, in contexts far removed from the original film. The name Monica Bellucci, when paired with this role, still prompts a particular kind of recognition in people who encountered it at the right moment in their lives. Bellucci herself has described the performance as one of the most technically demanding of her career, not for its physical requirements, but for the specific discipline of communicating a complete inner life through almost no spoken language, of making the humanity visible from behind the wall that the role required. The question of the two versions has not gone away. The Italian uncut print remains available in Europe. The full 108-minute version, with Morricone's score playing against the sequences that Weinstein removed, has never received an official English-language release. Film collectors who have tracked down both versions have spent years discussing the difference online. The appetite for the complete film has not diminished. It has, if anything, increased. Tornatore dedicated the film to his father. That dedication sits quietly at the opening of the film. Easy to miss. But knowing it is there changes the quality of everything that follows. The grief in the film's imagery. The particular tenderness with which it treats a landscape that no longer quite exists. This was not simply a project. It was a reckoning with something personal. There is a question Tornatore said he wanted every viewer to carry out of the cinema. Is it possible, he asked, that in my life somebody loved me so much, and I didn't know it? It is the kind of question that sounds small the first time you hear it. It is not small. The film that arrived on American screens at Christmas 2000 was 16 minutes shorter than the film Tornatore had made. Cut to satisfy a rating board. Shortened to fit a market. Some of its most important scenes reduced or removed before most of its audience ever had the chance to decide for themselves. And yet, even in that reduced form, it earned 2 Oscar nominations. It generated arguments about cinema, about gender, about beauty and punishment that are still being made today. And it produced a performance from Monica Bellucci that people who saw it once, 25 years ago, have never entirely forgotten. That is the standard by which films are judged in the long run. Not what the critics wrote the week it opened. Not what the rating board decided behind closed doors. Not how many minutes survived the distributor's cut. But whether, years later, it is still inside you. Malena is. If you grew up watching Italian cinema, or if you discovered it later and felt the pull of that specific combination of beauty and sadness and historical weight, then the next story on this channel is one you need to hear. We are covering the films that got buried, the performers who built careers in silence, and the directors who made deeply personal work inside commercial systems that did not always understand what they had. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, because the next story is already waiting, and it is one that most people have never heard told properly.